New from the ABC 7 News I-team, the FBI is investigating a religious sect that's facing allegations involving child sex abuse.
Sick. I mean, I'm just broken. Like, I could just cry right now.
The power and control.
We couldn't believe it.
There is so many more layers to this.
They call themselves 2x2s, or the Church with No Name.
And there's a following here in the Bay Area. ABC 7 News I-team reporter Stephanie Sierra has spent weeks speaking with former members and joins us live tonight to share their stories. Stephanie.
Yes, Alma and Dan, we have a lot to get to. Tonight, you'll get an extensive look into an organization former members say has something to hide. A so-called secret believed to have been swept under the rug for decades, haunting one generation after the next, including families right here in the Bay Area. 72 miles south of San Francisco, in a remote, isolated location of San Martin, there's allegations a dark secret is hiding within this ministry.
Walking in the way of God.
It's a non-denominational Christian religious sect that's been around for more than 100 years.
Which God that cannot lie.
Sometimes called the Church with No Name, or the 2x2s by outsiders.
How would you describe this organization?
They use fear and manipulation.
This organization literally hurts my stomach when I think about it.
It's a very persuasive type of religion.
If they didn't talk to God's true people, his chosen ones, then yes, they are going to hell.
I mean, what specifically do they do?
You're scared of the world. They make it a scary place to leave.
This is where I absolutely blame the truth for all of this.
The 2x2s are often referred today as the truth by its followers. According to the ministry's doctrine, this is the only way to find true salvation.
Do you think they're being truthful?
They're not being truthful, no.
Former members say that truth has something to hide.
Sick.
Secretive.
Sick. I mean, I'm just broken. Like, I could just cry right now.
Very harmful.
His type was small-framed brunette girl.
A convicted child molester, and he'd been in our home.
There is so many more layers to this.
In February, the FBI announced it's investigating the ministry and seeking victim information following allegations of child sexual abuse reported across the U.S. The church generally operates inside private homes of members, where worship services are held on Wednesdays and Sundays. It was founded by Scottish evangelist William Irvine in the late 1800s. Historical records suggest it wasn't until the early 1900s the ministry set roots in the Bay Area.
They went about in pairs. They call it 2x2. That's where we get the name.
Cherie Kropp, a former member and author of a historical biography on the religious sect, explains the hierarchy. Overseers are at the top, considered to be church leadership. Below them are the ministers or workers that travel in pairs of 2 men or 2 women as they evangelize and preach to members. Below them are the elders and friends that make up the members of the congregation.
The preachers were to be celibate.
These ministers often live in members' homes for a period of time before moving to the next. According to the scripture, it's considered an honor to host them.
I do remember workers, if they stayed with us, they would sleep in, like, our room.
Lynette Burridge Flanagan is a former member who lives in Union City. She says her cousin, Laura Lee Brown, pictured on the left, was sexually abused by another member at the age of 9 until she was 13.
Were the parents aware of this?
Mm-mm.
Was there an effort to report this abuse?
No.
Why do you think that is?
I think that they wanted to keep it a secret because I think that they believe that if you tarnish their perfect way or their perfect will or the only way, then that would look bad on them.
Can you walk me through what happened?
Her cousin, Laura Lee, says it's been a nightmare ever since.
My little foot and slipper. This was about in the middle of the time of the 3 years he was molesting me.
She shared a picture of her alleged perpetrator the night of his engagement to another woman.
He would immediately go back to sexually interacting with me whenever he could. How often would this happen? On a week-to-week basis, it would happen about 2 times a week or more.
Laura Lee says for 3 years, she didn't understand what was going on until 6th grade sex ed class.
and I left the class and went outside, and it was the first time I realized what had happened to me.
She was 13.
My parents were actually told at that time. I couldn't do school.
Laura Lee says she tried reporting it again 4 years later at age 17, but her parents still didn't believe her.
So with my parents, them allowing that to happen, basically, they allowed it.
My mom and dad.
Lynette says it's a crooked culture that's been passed through generations.
We do know that there was some abuse of my mom's. It was from her father, and he touched her inappropriately, and she was just like, Dad, like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I just want to see what kind of girl I raised. I want to make sure. Who does that?
Another former member who grew up in Visalia, south of Fresno, says her father was also a victim of abuse. Years later, Sherry Autry says she experienced it herself.
My abuse started with a minister. He started grooming me when he was in our field 2 years before the abuse started.
At the age of 13, she says a 28-year-old worker by the name of Steve Rose molested her throughout the duration of his 2-month visit in her home.
From my memory, it happened on a nightly basis. I mean, it was regular.
If you questioned him, tried to report it, what would happen?
You would get gaslit profusely and accused of having a bad spirit or the devil's getting into you. So how dare you question God?
In 1986, Autry wrote a high school research paper claiming that Rose repeatedly told her not to tell her parents. She says he promised her, quote, "If you ever get pregnant, then I'll marry you." He said what he was doing to me was right. Everyone in the church and public thought he was nice. Now, that same year, Rose sent an apology letter to church leadership where he admitted to kissing and touching Autry intimately, saying, quote, "I did not intend to cover this up, but I did not know how to handle it other than to leave the area and beg God to forgive me." Rose denied promising to marry Autry and stated they didn't have sex. Adding in the email, this did not happen with anyone else. Fast forward from 1986 to April of 2023. An email was sent to members about Rose, stating another allegation was made from outside of the state of Minnesota. The ABC 7 News I team made multiple calls to Steve Rose to get further comment, but we never heard back. ABC's Kira Phillips was able to track him down in Minneapolis. Here's what he had to say.
Steve Rose, Kira Phillips with ABC News. I'd like to ask you about these letters that you wrote Sherry Autry's parents and also your overseer.
Yeah, no comment.
Did you sexually abuse Sherry Autry when she was 14 and you were 28?
No comment.
Your overseer said that what you did was a felony. Do you believe your church protected you from this kind of abuse, protected you from going to jail? Does your church protect sexual predators? Does your church protect the children? We just want to get your side of the story. We want your response to what you wrote. You wrote that you were weak in the flesh. You were weak in the flesh. That's what you wrote. You woke that you were...
It was not a secret amongst leadership that he had molested me.
Autry says 6 years later, Rose was out of the ministry, but still leading meetings in his own home. She says she was horrified.
Okay, you do grape juice instead of wine to not tempt an alcoholic, but yet you keep pedophiles in meeting and put children in front of them.
Rose never faced criminal charges in this case and likely never will. According to the Tulare County DA's office, prosecutors have meticulously reviewed reports and victim accounts in this case and have determined that any potential crime falls outside of California's statute of limitations. We spoke with legal expert and veteran criminal defense attorney Seth Chazen, who specializes in sex crime cases.
Is this true?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, the charges can't be filed in this case due to the running of the statute of limitations.
So just to be clear, do either of these cases have any criminal recourse?
No. Charges were not filed prior to the alleged victim's 40th birthday.
According to a well-known anti-sexual violence organization, RAINN, only 7 states have eliminated the statute of limitations for all felony sex crimes. California is not one of them. in part because certain felony sex offenses like rape still has a statute of limitations.
We understand state lawmakers have attempted to change this.
Yeah, AB 2295 is simply saying there will be no statute of limitations for any child sexual assault.
But that bill has yet to pass. For now, the only law on the books is one that allows alleged victims who file a claim within 5 years or by age 40 to seek civil damages for childhood sexual assaults that occurred before this year. And both Sherry Autry and Laura Lee Brown say there was a sense of fear that prevented them from reporting their alleged abuse at the time.
And it was just such a symbolization of the power and control.
I don't know how I went through that year.
Decades later, it's unclear who exactly to hold accountable, but we tried to reach current local leadership representing the Bay Area congregation for further comment. We never heard back. That's until we located Gary Paul, a veteran worker based in Washington State, North Idaho, and Alaska. He was not involved in any of these cases, but we spoke with him about the broader allegations facing the ministry. He recently visited the South Bay for a special meeting. These meetings only happen on rare scheduled occasions, but they're difficult to track down as the schedules aren't posted publicly, and several were reportedly shut down following pressure from the federal investigation.
They preached the word.
After preaching this Sunday service,
Me and God.
Paul agreed to speak with us virtually the following week.
Gary, I've talked with numerous former members who say they have been sexually abused by ministers who were staying in their home at the time. Many of them say it went on for years. What's your response after hearing that?
Well, I never saw it. And knowing the, quote, church leadership, I find that very difficult to believe.
Nonprofit Advocates for the Truth, an organization dedicated to helping survivors across the world, says it's received reports on more than 900 alleged perpetrators that have been identified by a hotline worldwide. The organization says there are more than 1,500 alleged victims who've reached out for help since its inception in March last year. Autry is the former president and co-founder.
The FBI is now investigating your church. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think it's necessary, but they're doing it, so that's fine.
And you don't think it's necessary? Why?
Because I don't think that there is a cult trying to hide things.
There are hundreds of alleged victims that have come out indicating they were abused at one point or another. Because the allegations were made, don't you think it's important an investigation is done to fully vet what happened?
I suppose it would be.
After 57 years in the ministry, Paul says he never dealt with a child sexual assault case nor received formal training on how to respond to such allegations until after the federal investigation began.
Just to be clear, is that training voluntary or required now?
Voluntary.
Don't you think it should be required?
I don't think it should be required.
Would you consider this ministry to be secretive?
No, we're definitely not.
But some of those who grew up in it disagree.
Is there a culture within this religious sect that encourages sweeping things under the rug?
Uncomfortable topics are swept under the rug.
Ex-member Michael Day says he experienced that firsthand. He grew up in the religious sect with his cousin, John Vandenberg, a Hayward native.
It was shocking. He was on a missionary trip. When he was coming back, he was kicked out. He was molesting people, inappropriate touching of girls in the Philippines and one in Mexico. But they're just hearsay. I don't know.
Vandenberg died in March this year. Nearly a year before, this email was sent out from a regional leader in the ministry, reporting Vandenberg was the subject of several credible allegations of unacceptable sexual behavior, including a complaint of inappropriate touching of a minor, which was reported to the authorities.
I feel really bad, especially if they feel violated.
Day says he had 35 ministers or workers stay at his home growing up.
And one of them, who John knew, and we knew, stayed in our home and was later came out as a convicted child molester.
In the years that followed, Day says he grew out of the faith and was displeased with what he called the hypocrisy.
I would hear that there are no rules. We have no rules. No, there's rules galore.
A lot of man-made rules.
There are absolutely rules, and none of them are written down.
There's no jewelry.
Other than a wedding ring, basically no makeup.
TV, you must have long hair. You had to wear it pinned up on your head.
Wearing just very conservative clothes, like really dresses.
And no slacks or shorts.
What happens if you wear pants?
You would be looked at like up and down, like, what are you wearing? Like, why are you wearing pants?
There was one woman who had to confirm that she'd thrown away all her makeup and would not wear it again.
We asked Paul about that. He denied any rules about makeup.
What about wearing pants to Sunday service?
I don't feel that's very womanly. What the scripture says is that a woman should not wear what pertains to a man.
Not womanly to wear pants nor go to college, according to Laura Lee Brown. She says she wanted to be an attorney, but was told by the ministry.
That's too worldly. We don't think you should do that.
A religion with a strong set of rules that preaches they are destined to find the truth or the one true way. But questions linger as to who's really being honest.
We were told that the way is perfect, but the people are not.
But some former members argue the way is far from perfect.
There's no accountability when you go and try to talk to them about it. There's a cover. They'll just ignore you. They'll deny it.
Some former members believe there should be rules in place prohibiting ministers from staying in people's homes, arguing that it would protect innocent children from potentially being exposed to predatory behavior. Do you agree with that?
No, nowhere in the scripture does that support that. And in the multitude of years that I've been in it, it's never been a problem.
How do you know it hasn't been a problem?
It's never been a problem that I'm aware of. Obviously, it could have been, but I wasn't aware of it.
Just because you weren't aware of it. Well, don't you see value in protecting future generations, given what has already been publicly revealed?
I think it would affect the quality of our ministry. We've always stayed in the homes of God's people. Staying in a home makes you very vulnerable. It's true that the children in the family home are vulnerable also, but that's the way that the fellowship has been established.
From your perspective, what do you think it will take to see real change from all this?
Well, I don't like the word change, because there's a lot of things about the fellowship that cannot change.
It doesn't stop when the abuse stops.
They manipulate people.
It affects the rest of your life. It'll affect your children's life.
The irony is the ministry conflicts with former members, yet both are on missions to seek the truth. The question is, will it bring justice? Now, the FBI continues to seek the public's help in identifying victims of abuse within this religious group. If you have any information that could assist this investigation or have personally been victimized by anyone affiliated with this group, go to our website, abc7news.com, to report directly to the FBI. And as you saw, we worked in conjunction with ABC News and Nightline on this investigation. You can see the full Impact by Nightline episode, Secrets of the 2x2 Church, streaming now on Hulu and later tonight on Nightline.
Wow, what an impactful look, Stephanie.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to follow, and we will be staying on this very closely to see what happens with the FBI investigation.
Good.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Stephanie.
Absolutely.